Oh, Ron, it looks like we're live.
Yeah, and this is a case of his and hers.
Exactly. Okay, let's do this.
Everyone thinks because you're a zombie, you don't know good coffee. Well, they're wrong. There's only one brew that gets my seal of approval. Deadly Grounds coffee is my guilty pleasure. The aroma is so intoxicating. It brings all of my neighbors out of the woodwork. Deadly Grounds coffee. Coffee to die for and zombie approved. It's good to get a little deadly. Use the front door! Oh, they're so disgusting.
The Dorkening and all affiliated shows are not intended for anyone under the age of 18. The following may contain discussions or scenes that have adult situations, graphic violence, nudity, strong sexual content, and graphic language. This show is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, my lovelies, and welcome back to another episode of Corpse Garden Reads. And this time around, we get to have Ron. Hi, Ron.
Good evening.
How did the haunting go?
It went great. I had a really good time. It was actually a great weekend, and I need more like those. I love Hell's Dungeon. They're such a great haunt to work for.
Oh yeah, and you've got so much love. I've seen like three or four comments on how awesome Inya was.
Yeah, it's always a unique experience playing that character, and we kind of changed it up a little bit this time because normally Nursenia wears platform boots, 5-inch platform boots, and unfortunately, we had a blowout and one of the platforms broke off of the boot, and I did not have time to get them replaced. So I ended up wearing roller skates, as I've done in the past with my clown character, and I wondered how well it would go over with Nurse Enya, but they were a big hit, so I was pretty happy about it, and it went off quite well.
Did you have any standout moments?
Standout moments. I suppose you would have to actually see the act to determine what you think a standout moment would be. It's always fun when the groups play along because Nursenia is not so much a scary character as she is an awkward character that makes everybody feel uncomfortable. And Mia from Carnage, she loves to play along. She's a very fun person to have in a group, and she brought through a couple of other haunters, and that was probably one of my favorite groups. One standout moment I did have, well, I would have to give spoilers on the act if I were to tell the story, but let's just say that it was a couple, guy and a girl. They were probably out on a Valentine date. Young couple, both fairly attractive, and I'm going through my bit, and the girl thinks I'm kidding, that it's a joke, until she realized that it was not, and then she was shocked. And they both walked away laughing because I don't think that they've ever had an experience like that in a haunted house.
Very true.
Made me happy.
Oh, yeah. And yet is something else.
Most definitely.
So, this episode, wait a minute. I keep calling it the Her story anytime I tell anybody about it, because what was it called? The 13th
The
race?
13th race.
Okay, tonight you're going to read us the 13th race.
Oh, heaven forbid.
I figure you'll read it, and then afterwards we'll play the commercials, and then we'll talk about a couple authory questions about the story. Do you want the picture up, or do you just want your face up? You have the option here.
It's entirely up to you. I mean,
okay.
If I'm reading, then it's probably better to have my face up, and people can look at this ugly mug and be disgusted by the horror of it.
You are not ugly at all. I was just surprised about how much shorter you are than me.
No, I'm only 5'7". I'm tall for my shortness.
I get to look down on you and kiss you on the top of your head. So please continue.
Don't be fooled by the fact that I may not look very tall, because I am a rather stocky dude.
Yes.
And I can certainly F some shit up.
That is true. You are trained.
Okay. All right. So we're doing this. Okay. Wow. I should probably give some caveats here that I have not read this book or this story since I was editing it for Inside My Nightmares. So this is actually a cold read, and I do not believe I've ever read this story on one of our podcasts before. So this should be a unique experience for all of us. This is called the 13th race. The thunder crack made him jump in his seat a little bit. He knew it was coming. He had seen the lightning, but still, he jumped. He hated racing on nights like tonight. The cloud cover made it impossible to see the black top of the road. And when the rain hit the pavement, traction was close to nil. He hoped he could make it at least out to the turnaround point at milepost 13 before the rain started. He looked out at his driver's side window. He could see Kurt Kendrick sitting behind the steering wheel of the Camaro next to him, looking smug, thinking his Camaro had the edge over his hearse. Kurt noticed him watching and made the hand motion gesture to roll down the window. The hearse was built before power windows, so he had to manually engage the window using the tiny hand crank. A brisk waft of cool air rushed in, doing nothing to calm his nerves. "You're going down, hearse boy," said Kurt, laughing, bouncing in his seat like an elated child. He rolled his eyes and said nothing, merely rolled the window back up, waited for the flag to drop. Outside the window, he could see Kurt. A crowd still gathered around the Camaro, wishing Kurt good luck. Kurt had always been the popular one. Though they had grown up in the same town together, they had never really been friends until both had gone off to college. They had bonded because they were from a small town, and Kurt's natural good looks and athletic prowess had made him immediately popular. He, on the other hand, was a stark contrast to Kurt's all-American looks. His features were gaunt and shallow. His dark eyes hinted at something more mysterious. He preferred the quiet, yet it was ever anything but quiet when Kurt was around. This had been somewhat helpful and often awkward when dealing in social gatherings. He was not winning any popularity contest, but Kurt had been his in with the popular crowd. His hearse, however, was the great equalizer. Behind its wheel, he felt empowered, unique from everyone else, and therefore popular in its own right. The hearse seemed to fit his physical image, his somber personality, His black hair matched his black t-shirt and faded black denim jeans. The hearse itself seemed to be an outward reflection of that, long and black, mysterious, slightly ominous. He loved the car. Before the race, each driver had the chance to inspect the other's car. This was a gentleman's race. No nitrous or installed implements that would give the car a boost. The race had to be won fair and square on the merit of the car's build and the driver's skill. And Kurt was a good driver, one of the best. Kurt's Camaro had the quick acceleration, but lacked the staying power for a distance race such as this one. But 12 out of 12 races, and no one had come close to beating his hearse. The thunder cracked again. Again he jumped. Again he had seen the lightning. He had counted 1, 2, 3. 13 seconds. The storm was getting closer. This was no coincidence. He needed to do something to calm his nerves. The flag drop was imminent. The holder merely waiting for the opportune moment when the crowd was at its fullest. No rush. He switched on the CD player. Black Summer 89, 6 dead, 2 suicides. God ain't here tonight, that chill rains down your spine. Spit on us, we'll spit on you. Devil's Point will bury you. Seraphim Shock. Ordinarily, he'd be all for it, but the lyrics did nothing to cheer his mood. He switched the music off. He looked down at the CD player. Track 13. Another coincidence? It had been one of those days. However, he had no time to think about it. The flag was about to drop. John had no idea how long his alarm had been sounding. A heavy hand came smashing down on it, and the sound ceased. He looked at the time. It read 13:13. The digital clock was set for the 24-hour standard. John worked indoors and at odd hours, so he easily lost track of times. Sometimes he didn't know if it was day or night. The 24-hour standard helped him distinguish AM from PM. Unfortunately, shortly after 1 p.m. in the afternoon, he was late for work. He shrugged off the grogginess and made himself get up. Showered, shaved, and dressed in his usual black attire, black t-shirt, faded black jeans, John found himself walking through the back entrance of Schrodinger's funeral home, his place of employment. "You're late, Mr. Triska," rang the sing-songy voice of his overweight funeral director boss, Mr. Schrodinger. "Yes, sir. I know, sir. I'm sorry, sir. It won't happen again, sir." John spewed the phrase as he'd done many times before. Truth was, Mr. Schrodinger honestly didn't care about John's tardiness. John was absolutely the only person in the entire town who had responded to the Help Wanted ad, and despite his tardiness, was very good at his job. "Mrs. Kendrick has been in the waiting room for 45 minutes. She would like to set up funeral arrangements for her daughter. You knew the girl, didn't you?" "Yes, sir, I did. Sarah." "I figured as much. That's why I'm letting you deal with her. I figured it would help her to have someone who knew the girl be there for her." It was a good excuse, if not completely true. Mr. Schrodinger had once tried to have an affair with Miss Kendrick. The situation did not end well. They weren't entirely on speaking terms. He was the last person she'd want to see. "I'll take care of it," answered John. "Then once you're done with Mrs. Kendrick, go ahead and prepare the girl Sally for viewing." "Sarah," John corrected, but it was useless. Mr. Schrodinger was already 1 foot out the door. "I'm off to see Father Murphy about doing the eulogy. I'll be back later." Schrodinger called on his hefty frame and disappeared through the doorway, which meant to John he would not be back for the rest of the day. Mr. Schrodinger would take the opportunity to slip down to the pub to indulge in a few pints, then forget he had responsibilities and end up stumbling home. John wondered how long it would be before Mr. Schrodinger himself was on John's metal table. Mrs. Kendrick was red-faced when John entered the room, but she had for the moment ceased crying. "Mrs. Kendrick, I'm John Triska. Mr. Schrodinger asked me to take care of the arrangements with you." John sat down behind the large, expensive-looking wooden desk. Like so many other things in this funeral parlor, it too was a facade, something that Mr. Schrodinger had probably salvaged out of a dumpster somewhere and refurbished it. Underneath its expensive-looking mahogany-style exterior, it was cheap particle board. "You knew my daughter?" she asked. She dabbed at her eyes with a worn tissue. John handed her another from the box on the desk. "I did," answered John. Not well, though. I knew her brother, Kurt. I had seen her around. She seemed like a good kid. Mrs. Kendrick dabbed her eyes. Oh, you know Kurt? She asked. Yes, said John. We went to school together. Oh, you're that John. Kurt's talked about you. He said you were a quiet type and kept to yourself a lot. Despite the years John had known Kurt, it occurred to him that this was the first time he had actually met Mrs. Kendrick. Is that why you never came to dinner? She asked. John was taken aback by the question. So far as he could recall, Kurt had never invited him to dinner. Regardless, she was probably right and would have declined the invitation anyway. Yes, ma'am, I apologize for that. Kurt was a good friend. He tried to steer the topic back on track. Do you mind telling me what happened? At the question, Miss Kendrick choked up again, but then quickly regained control. It was that damn street racing. I kept telling Kurt not to do it. I knew something like this was going to happen, and she was in the car when it did. And now she's gone, and Kurt's in the hospital. She was only 13. She started sobbing again. John stayed silent and gave her time to grieve. I understand completely, said John after the appropriate amount of time had passed. I'll tell you what, why don't you go home and get some rest? The details aren't necessary right now, and there will be plenty of time to work them out. I'll get back to you in a day or so, and we can work it out then. How does that sound? Often John found the best way to deal with the recently grieving was to put everything off until they were ready to deal with it. This was one of the things John liked about his job. The dead aren't going anywhere. Before Mrs. Kendrick really had a chance to reply, John was ushering her out the door, still sobbing. She would thank him later. Now left on his own, the place was quiet, just the way John liked it, silent and peaceful. Now he could focus on his work uninterrupted. The preparation room resembled a beauty salon more than a morgue. There were 6 cold storage lockers where the bodies were kept and a large metal table in the center of the room. But there were no fancy medical instruments such as one would find in a mortician's workspace. The wall opposite the storage lockers was lined with a large sink, a table with various types of makeup, long rack of clothes, and some other useful tools to help John perform his job. John went to the first storage locker. He opened it. A black body bag rested on the gurney inside. He rolled the metal table over and slid the gurney out on top of it. John closed the locker and returned the table to the center of the room. The body bag was just a formality, really. It was used to conceal the identity of the deceased from the outside world and often to shield a horrifying and sometimes gruesome sight from the less casual observer. But for John, he inevitably saw it all. He unzipped the body bag. The face of Sarah Kendrick greeted him with no expression, eyes closed, pale skin. She was a cute girl in a pixie way with long, glossy black hair. There was some discoloration around the eyes, but otherwise nothing terribly gruesome. John rolled her completely out of the body bag. Her naked form lay on the table, almost iridescent under the light. Her pert little breasts hinted at her onset of womanhood. She was only 13. Dear Sarah, John spoke out loud, though not expecting a response. The dead were brutally silent. I did not know you all that well, but I remember you. Had I known you were in the car, I would have never raced your brother. He looked down at her as if expecting a response. There was none. Don't worry, though. I'll take good care of you. It's the least I can do. John set about his work. He examined the body for blemishes. Other than the discoloration around the eyes, there was only one on the back of the neck. The file had said her neck was broken in the crash. John picked up a ruler. 13 centimeters, he said. It was large enough to be noticeable. It would need to be covered. The irony of his job never ceased to amuse him. He was an underglorified beautician. His job was to make the dead look alive, as if they were merely sleeping, not deceased. This was easier on some than others. The gruesome cases where the victims had been burned or disfigured in some way presented more challenge. In a case like Sarah Kendrick, it was easy. Sometimes John had to deal with stitches and marks left over from autopsy if there had been one, but Sarah had not required an autopsy, so her natural beauty had been left intact. He washed her hair and hosed her body down, making sure to collect any particulates and set them aside in case the police decided to continue their investigation. He applied some toner around the eyes to counteract the discoloration and painted her lips with a burgundy red. It was already dark by the time John had finished his work. All that remained was to dress her in a suitable outfit for the burial. This would most likely be provided by Mrs. Kendrick when they made the arrangements. John delicately slid her back into the cold storage unit, and rather than the body bag, he had placed a clean white sheet over her. "Good night, Sarah," he said to the storage unit. Again, the room was deathly quiet. John did not wait for a response that was not forthcoming. He had to get ready. It was almost time to race. Making sure the room was in meticulous order and all the surfaces and instruments were clean and sterilized, he turned out the light and let the door close behind him. The flag dropped just as another flash of lightning emblazoned the sky. As expected, the Camaro pulled ahead first, but he let it happen. He let it stay within a car length ahead and matched it move for move on the road, trying to stay within the draft. He could not see Kurt through the rear window of the Camaro in front of him, but he imagined Kurt still bouncing up and down on the seat, thinking he had the upper hand. The thunder crack made the windows rattle. The first drops of rain pelted his windshield. So much for making it to milepost 13. He flipped the wipers on. The beams from his headlights could now barely touch the rear bumper of the Camaro. The turnaround wouldn't be the deciding point in the race. He knew this. As another flash of lightning swept through the hearse, he noticed a shadow in the passenger seat. Quickly, he glanced over. It was a girl with glossy black hair and pale skin. There was some discoloration around the eyes. "Sarah," he said. The thunder cracked again, causing his hands to jerk slightly on the steering wheel of the hearse. He had to bring his attention back to the road. When he looked again, she was gone. John woke with a gasp. He was freezing, though he realized he was sweating. He jumped out of bed and ran into the bathroom, where he applied warm water to his face and toweled off. He sat back down on the bed, tried to get his breathing under control. Today was the funeral. John looked at the digital clock. 13:06. The viewing was at 2 p.m., immediately followed by the funeral. John was in no rush. In his experience, people typically showed up fashionably late to functions such as these. The first to arrive would only just now be getting there at the funeral home. Mr. Schrodinger could handle the guest until it was time to perform his duty of driving the casket to the ceremony. He had enough time. The arrangements had been made with Mrs. Kendrick days ago, and John had worked late last night to finish prepping Sarah's body. He had put her in the black dress that Mrs. Kendrick had provided, then styled her hair, touched up the makeup, and finally placed her gently into the casket the family had chosen. After his usual morning ritual and downing some Pop-Tarts, he made his way to the funeral home. Mr. Schrodinger was there putting on his act of feigned compassion, shaking hands all the time, subtly advertising his funeral services. "There is life after death," he would say, "and at Schrodinger's, we believe the dead truly come alive." John thought he needed to work on his sales pitch, but he said nothing. Schrodinger's was the only funeral parlor in town. People had no choice but to bring their business here. He stood quietly near the wall while the wake continued. Eventually, Mr. Schrodinger made his way over to him. "We need to get the casket loaded and get the procession moving," he said. "Yes, sir," said John, as Mr. Schrodinger helped to usher people out. John, along with a handful of pallbearers close to the family, picked up the casket and carried it through the parlor to the hearse waiting outside. The casket felt surprisingly heavy for a small girl. John knew the majority of the weight was in its construction and the type of wood and materials used. He never understood why people spent so much money on something that's only going to be buried anyway. Once the casket was loaded, John moved to the driver's side and slid in behind the wheel. Though it felt similar to his street racer, this one was by no means powerful enough to win a race. A hearse was meant to move slowly so people could see it, not souped up with a custom-built Hemi engine. John pulled out slowly, and the procession fell in behind him. The cemetery was only a short distance from the parlor. One could walk there in mere minutes, but John drove the requisite snail's pace for the appropriate dramatic effect. His foot felt like a steel weight on the gas pedal, begging to be let loose, but John resisted. There would be time for that later. After arriving to the cemetery, John and the pallbearers removed the casket from the hearse, and the procession stood around the open grave. Father Murphy began his eulogy. John stood next to Mr. Schrodinger. but he had heard these words many times before. He largely drowned them out as he scanned the audience. He counted 13 people, himself included. He had expected more, but that is the nature of funerals. John noticed Kurt was among them, sitting in a wheelchair, both his legs wrapped in casts. Kurt's face was pale, his expression grim. He seemed to be avoiding eye contact with anyone. As Father Murphy droned on, John noticed a figure standing off in the distance under a tree, bathed in shadow. John stepped away from the group to take a closer look. Approaching the tree, he could see it was the figure of a small girl. Even closer, he could see she had glossy black hair. Standing next to her finally, he saw the discoloration around her eyes. Sarah? The apparition looked up at John. Her mouth opened as if about to say something, but just then John heard his name called from behind him. John turned to look. Kurt was rolling toward him. "How are you getting on?" asked John as Kurt came to a stop beside him. "I can deal with the physical pain," Kurt said, "but losing her, I don't know." "I'm sorry, Kurt," said John. "If I had known she was in the car, I wouldn't have taken the race." "I'm not blaming you, John. She jumped in just before the flag drop. I didn't have time to think. I just reacted. I should have forfeited the race. I should have made her get out." "How long does the doctor say before you're out?" John tried to change the subject, indicating the cast on both of Kurt's legs. 13 weeks, Kurt replied. "Mom cries every night. It's hard for her having to take care of me and all. She doesn't know it was me you were racing." It's more a statement of realization than a question. Nonetheless, Kurt answered it like a question. "No, she doesn't. No sense making it even worse for the both of us. The official story we fed the police was that I was driving Sarah home from the movies and lost control on the wet road. How's the Camaro? Car's totaled, man. She'll never race again." "What about you?" "Come on, John. You know better than that. We went to school together. Hell, we practically grew up together. You think this can keep me down?" He tried to look brave, but his eyes hinted uncertainty. John did not fail to notice. "All the same," started John. "Hey," Kurt interrupted. "I get it. Believe me, I'm in no rush. If I race, I race. If I don't, well, it's not the end of the world. I got nothing but time to think about it." "Mm-hmm," John replied half-heartedly. "Look, I gotta go. Mom needs me right now." It seemed as good an excuse as any to end the conversation. John nodded but said nothing. Knowing he would not get a response, Kurt turned his chair, headed back toward the group. John turned back to where he had seen the apparition, but it was no longer there. They were inspecting each other's cars. Kurt's Camaro was tight. All original parts in the engine completely stripped, clean, and rebuilt. It was a beautiful car, worthy of admiration. But the crowd was gathered around John's hearse. It was an old model 1957 Chevy Landau. The original engine had been stripped out and replaced with a 426 Generation 2 Hemi crate engine, 540 horsepower. The inside frame of the car had been reinforced with roll bars. John had done most of the work himself. It had started as a hobby project, but after winning his first race and the prize money along with it, he began taking more of an interest. "So why a hearse?" asked someone in the crowd. "I mean, how? Where? I mean, who races a hearse?" John stepped forward. "The car," he began, "has an unusual history." The crowd quieted, waiting to hear the story. John always felt awkward in social gatherings, but he looked at Kurt, who had been his source of social strength in college. Kurt nodded as if to say, "Go ahead." John swallowed, then putting on his best air of dramatics, he began speaking. "You remember old man Forrester, right? Well, after he died, this was the hearse that was supposed to carry him to the cemetery. But on the night before the funeral, the hearse was stolen from the funeral home." He knew he had everyone's attention now. Standing by his hearse, the ice broken, he felt strength. He felt confident. He continued. "Apparently, two men wanted to use the hearse as their getaway car in a bank robbery they were planning. They stole the money and got out of town, but little did they know, old man Forrester's casket was still in the back. Nobody really knows what went down that night, but when the police finally caught up to the bank robbers, they found them both dead. The police have no idea what really happened to them. There were no gunshot wounds, no signs of struggle, not even a single injury. But both of their faces were torqued in a gruesome expression as if they had seen something unnatural. The police never recovered the money. Old man Forrester was buried, and some say the money was buried with him. He paused for dramatic effect, looking round at the crowd. Some people believe it was the ghost of old man Forrester that killed those two bank robbers, and to this day, his spirit still haunts this very hearse. Now, I don't know for sure, but I tell you, sometimes I feel the car has a mind of its own, like I'm not the one driving it. That could be why she wins so many races. It's old man Forrester forever locked in reliving that night trying to find his grave. Or he just wants to keep all that prize money for himself, exclaimed Kurt. The group laughed. John smiled. It felt like a huge sigh of relief. Inside he was shaking, but he knew he had gotten through another social awkwardness with Kurt's help. You're full of shit, John, said Kurt, patting him on the back. Come on, let's get this race going. John smiled to himself, for he knew Kurt was partly right. In truth, John had purchased the hearse at auction for $1,300. For a fact, it had been stolen, taken for a joyride by some neighborhood kids, but it had not been used in any bank robberies that John knew about. The hearse had ended up gift wrapping a tree. A large branch had penetrated the windshield. The funeral home had claimed its insurance once the car was declared totaled and resold the car as scrap parts. John had done some research and found that in mint condition, the car had an estimated value of $35,000. He had decided $1,300 seemed like a good investment. It had taken more than a year and the majority of his savings and college money, but he had turned the totaled hearse into a formidable street racing machine. Furthermore, there had actually been a bank robbery and the money had never been recovered, though that event had occurred 13 years ago. Old man Forrester did die around that same time, and this was the very same hearse which had carried his body, but so far as John knew, these two events were not related. However, his employment at the funeral home only lent credence to this urban legend. Therefore, Kurt's assessment that "you're full of shit, John," was not entirely inaccurate. John still reveled in the warmth of the social acceptance. He was disinclined to reveal the truth regarding this esoteric bit of knowledge. The two shook hands, and John slid in behind the steering wheel of the long black hot rod. "John, wait!" It was a female voice. John looked up. She had long, glossy black hair, pale blue eyes, and porcelain skin. "Sarah," John asked, "what are you doing here? It's late. You should be at home." "You think I would miss this? You kicking my brother's butt? No way. I just wanted to wish you luck." "Thanks. I appreciate it. And maybe after you win this race, we can go out for a milkshake or something." She had a coy expression on her face, as if almost too timid to ask the question. Her face was flushed. John had known Kurt for several years, but Sarah had always been too young for him to take notice. But now he saw her natural beauty as if for the first time. She was hanging in his driver's side window, showing cleavage at the top of her baby doll t-shirt, her pert breast hinting at the onset of womanhood. Suddenly, John felt warm. He forced himself to breathe out slowly and consider his next words so as not to crush her youthful case of puppy love. John chuckled. "You're cute, Sarah, but don't you think I'm a little too old for you?" "I'm almost 14, she exclaimed. "Sorry, hun," said John, trying to let her down easy. "Come back in 5 years, then we'll talk." "Sarah," this time it was Kurt's voice. "Get away from there. What are you doing?" "I'm just wishing him luck," she retorted. Then to add emphasis, she leaned down and gave John a peck on the cheek. "Kick his ass," she said. The time immediately following a funeral always seemed an awkward one to John. It typically started with the bereaved stating, "I'm fine, really I am," and then someone close to him or her saying, "I don't think you should be alone right now." This inevitably led to a small gathering of people at the house of the bereaved, socializing and telling stories over peach cobbler and copious amounts of alcohol. John was not much of a drinking man, but he did enjoy peach cobbler, and somehow there seemed to be far more people at the gathering than had actually shown up at the funeral. John felt no real desire to socialize. He was there primarily to lend support to Kurt, who was putting on his best effort to be sociable, and it was clear to John Kurt would rather be anywhere but here. Stepping in, John took the handles of Kurt's wheelchair and said, "Let's get some fresh air." He wheeled him through the crowd and out the door to the back porch, then helped guide the chair down the steps carefully into the backyard. Once they were far enough away and hidden under the cover of a maple tree, John said, "Thanks for that. I don't know much more I could have taken." "Don't mention it," said John. The two sat there like that until the crowd began to thin out. Neither really wanted to speak, and both felt that was perfectly fine. It took some time for the people to disperse, and John had to return to the hearse to the funeral parlor. But after Kurt forced him to take home several helpings of peach cobbler, he finally managed to return the hearse. However, instead of going straight home, John found himself once again at the cemetery. It was a clear night with a slight chill in the air. John didn't know what it was that had brought him back to her gravesite. It was silent and peaceful, just the way he liked it. He sat down underneath the tree where he had previously seen her apparition. He pulled his jacket tighter around him to counteract the cold. It wasn't long before he felt her presence. "Sarah," he said. He did not look at her directly. He knew she was there. The apparition materialized next to him, as if stepping out of a shadow. She sat down next to him. She laid her head on his shoulder. There was no physical sensation to this simple act, yet John felt it regardless. He said nothing, just breathed in, released a huge sigh. The night was quiet, as if all movement had stopped, just the chill and the thinness of the air and her head on his shoulder. John closed his eyes and leaned back against the tree. He felt a knot inside, an unusual sensation he hadn't felt before. In that moment, John felt incredible guilt. That was it. The knot he felt was guilt over Sarah's death. He felt responsible. Just then, a wash of warmth flowed over him, enveloping that knot. He opened his eyes. Sarah had laid her hand on top of his. The warmth spread through his body. It felt inviting, comfortable. He let it engulf him as he once again closed his eyes and melted into the tree. He was back in the race, but something seemed odd. He was not in his hearse. John looked and saw Kurt sitting next to him in the driver's seat. He was in the passenger seat of the Camaro. He looked down at his hands. They were small and feminine. He saw his reflection in the rearview mirror. Sarah's face gazed back at him. And suddenly, through the windshield, an apparition appeared in the road directly in front of the car. It was a girl with glossy black hair and discoloration around the eyes. John was startled and yelled, "Look out!" He tried to grab the wheel. Kurt resisted by jerking the wheel to the left, and the Camaro fishtailed. And then suddenly, gravity was absent. Like watching a slow-motion movie, John watched as the vehicle flipped and rolled. He felt his head slam off the passenger window. Then everything went black. When his vision returned, John found himself in an unfamiliar place. The sound of a female's piercing scream slicing through his brain. He put his hands up to drown the noise out. They were small, feminine hands. Suddenly, he found himself rushing into the bathroom, lurching over the toilet. Nothing came out. Looking in the mirror, he saw Sarah's reflection. Her glossy black hair was a mess, her features sunken and bags under her eyes. He watched as the reflection reached into the medicine cabinet and pulled out a vial of pills and choked down a handful. Slowly, the images began to fade until John was once again engulfed in blackness. He opened his eyes. Sarah was still there, her hand on his. The knot John had felt had disappeared. Though there was no physical touch of the hand, John brought the dainty hand up and kissed the back of it. Sarah smiled. The two sat there like that, together, not moving, until the first rays of sunshine began to peek over the distant horizon. John checked his watch. 4 a.m. It had been 13 hours since her funeral. "I get it now," said John softly. With that, Sarah's apparition disappeared. Milepost 13 was on a wide open stretch of road, lined on one side by a wooded area and the other by a large open field surrounded by barbed wire fence. Just past Milepost 13 lay a sharp curve that overlooked a large lake. For that reason, the milepost was the ideal turnaround point for street racing. Some of the riskier street racers would challenge their rivals to a game of chicken, see who could come closest to the edge of the curve without going into the lake. And of course, some of the riskier street racers had failed in that regard, meeting a watery end to their racing career, if not their lives. After pulling so many cars out of the lake, the city finally put up pylons as a deterrent. On a normal sunny day, this was a nice stretch of road to drive at a leisurely pace. But on rainy nights like tonight, the curve and the lake beyond was practically invisible. Only the riskiest of the street racers would even attempt racing on a night like tonight. Unfortunately, John was one of them. By winning 12 races in a row, he had built up a bit of a reputation. If he hadn't thought he could make it to the milepost and turn around before the rain started, he might not have taken the race. But now, with the rain driving against his windshield and the taillights of the Camaro disappearing in front of him, he was past the point of no return. Biting his bottom lip, he gunned it. With a heaving shake, the hearse jumped forward. The Camaro had disappeared completely against the night. Very briefly, out of the corner of his eye, John saw the milepost, its reflective numbers, dimly claiming 13 in the beam of his headlights. And in that quick glance, John also saw something else completely unexpected. Directly in front of him in the road was a figure. It was a man wearing a black t-shirt, faded black denim jeans. The rain had slicked his black hair back down on his head, giving his face a skull-like appearance. But the most startling feature of all was the gaping hole where the chest should have been. It was only a brief glimpse that John had, but something registered in his mind. The figure looked strikingly familiar. It disappeared just as quickly as it had manifested. The apparition startled John, and without thinking, he quickly reacted to the ghostly image. He yanked the wheel to the right, trying to miss whatever it had been, but on the wet, slippery blacktop, the car fishtailed, spinning a complete circle. He felt the left back end connect with something hard, and out of his driver's side window, he briefly saw a glimpse of the Camaro careening off the road toward the open field. He lost sight of the car as the hearse continued its spin. John fought to maintain control, but the tires had little traction on the wet pavement. Sensing the curve ahead, he slammed the brake pedal, but the car's momentum kept it going forward, skidding off the side of the road directly toward the wooded area. Ahead of him, the headlights outlined a very large tree, a massive tree branch like a giant skeletal arm reaching through his windshield, reaching for his heart. John opened his eyes. He felt an iron taste in his mouth. It was warm and liquid. His brain sent a nerve impulse to his arms, but there was no response. He couldn't move. As his vision began to reclaim its clarity, John saw the windshield covered in a spiderweb of cracks and broken glass. The tree branch had broken through, protruding inside the car. John looked down. The branch had not stopped with the windshield. If he could have felt pain at that moment, he might have cried out. But all he could do was stare down at where his chest cavity had exposed, ripped open by wooden tendrils. He became vaguely aware of a voice. "John! John!" It was Kurt, screaming at him through the driver's side window, which ironically appeared to be intact. "John, the door's jammed. Hang on, we're going to get you out, okay?" "Never mind me," rasped John. "How's Sarah?" Kurt seemed taken aback. "Sarah? She's fine, John. A little shook up, but fine. You hang on, we're getting help." "Then it's as it should be," replied John. "What are you talking about?" yelled Kurt. "You're talking crazy, John. You're in shock. Just relax. We'll get you out." "Just do me a favor," said John. "Just tell Sarah I'm sorry." "What? Sorry for what, John? Sorry for what?" "Tell her I'm sorry, but I'm afraid I won't be here in 5 years." "What, John? That makes no sense. You're talking crazy. Just relax and you can tell her yourself when we get you out, okay?" But there was no reply. "John! John!" Kurt knocked on the glass. Very feebly, John opened his eyes again. "Hey, Kurt?" "Yeah, John." "What time is it?" Kurt looked at his watch. "It's 1:13, buddy. Just hang tight. Help's coming," said John, a trickle of blood erupting from his mouth. 13:13. I get it now. "I don't know what you're saying, John. Just relax, okay? You're in shock." Again, there was no response. "John! John!" Kurt rapped on the glass again, but it was too late. John spoke no more. Sarah woke with a gasp. She was freezing, though she realized she was sweating. She jumped out of bed and ran to the bathroom. The urge to vomit raced up her esophagus with that horrid acid burning sensation which set off her gag reflex. She hunched over the toilet and her abdominal muscles clenched violently, but nothing came out. Her face pallid, her eyes watering, her brain trying to crack through her skull. She applied warm water to her face and then toweled off. She flapped back down on the bed and tried to get her breathing under control. Today was the day. Normally the nightmares were manageable, but today of all days, the dark images that filled her head seemed uncontrollable. But Sarah was bound and determined to do what she had to do on her own, sober, without the aid of the pills the doctor had given her for the nightmares. Sarah lay there for a bit, just letting her body correct itself. She could not close her eyes for fear of seeing the visions again. So she simply stared up at the ceiling, a dull backdrop of blandness. It suited her. Gradually, she finally managed to sit back up. Taking one more moment to breathe a long sigh of relief, she stood up on wobbly legs and went about the task of getting ready for the day. Standing in front of the bathroom mirror, Sarah took stock of her appearance. Her face was still pale, and there were slight bags under her eyes due to lack of sleep. She grimaced, making her sunken features look even more skull-like. It was nothing that some makeup could not fix. Sarah brushed out her long, glossy black hair and then applied a dark eyeshadow and burgundy red lipstick. Then she went to the closet and picked out a respectable black dress. Sarah stood in her underwear, holding the dress out in front of her arm's length, inspecting it. It reminded her of the last time she had worn it, and it was a day not unlike today. In fact, it had been the day the nightmares had begun. The thought made her shiver a little, but she shrugged them off and slid the dress over her body. Once again, Sarah gazed at herself in the mirror. Satisfied that she now looked somewhat more human, she shut out the light. Sarah looked at the digital clock. 13:13. Make a wish, she said out loud to herself. Sarah stood at the gravestone. It was a clear sunny day with a brisk breeze. She was the only one in the cemetery. Hello, John, she said. I'm here. The cemetery was quiet, devoid of any noise, not even birds or crickets. Sarah couldn't even hear the leaves as they rustled in the trees when the wind blew. I remember, John, continued Sarah, unfazed. You said come back in 5 years. Well, it's been 5 years, and here I am. I'm 18 now, John. Suddenly, she started to feel the tears well up. She choked back a sob and made herself continue. I'm 18 now, and where are you? You're not here. Sarah held it back no more. She fell to her knees and covered her face with her hands. She let the tears flow. As she cried, the images of that night came pouring back, all the nightmares from the last 5 years breaking down the floodgates in her mind, images of the funeral, images of her brother with John as they pulled around together, images of John himself as she had watched him from a distance while he worked on his hearse. She remembered thinking how cool it was that he had a hearse and that he raced it. She remembered all the times she had wanted to say something to him, to profess her undying love for him, but even then she had known it was childish puppy love. She had been too scared. Secretly, she had hoped that when she got older, John would start to notice her on his own. Those torrential thoughts flowed with the tears, a powerful rushing river of emotion finally let loose with no barriers holding them back. 5 years of pent-up despair, of trying to act normal in public, of trying to pretend that she really was okay, now given free rein to bombard her mind with countless terrifying thoughts and images. She saw the accident as if with witnessing it from an omniscient third-person point of view. The rain did not obstruct her vision as the hearse careened on the road, slamming into the Camaro, causing it to veer off into the open field and getting entangled in the barbed wire fence where it came to a stop. Then the hearse heading for a straight-on collision with a massive old tree. Sarah could not help but watch as the huge tree limb penetrated the windshield. She could practically hear the flesh ripping and the ribs cracking as the tendrils of the branch opened the chest cavity. Sarah saw the look on John's face as all this was happening. But it was not fear she saw. He seemed at peace. He was practically smiling. In her omniscient reverie, she could see his eyes, and there was something there, something hidden behind them. Sarah shifted her point of view closer to his eyes, until she found herself falling into them. She saw what he saw. She saw John at the funeral home. A body was laid out on the cold metal table. It had long, black, glossy hair, a pale complexion, and discoloration around the eyes. Sarah saw herself. She saw the accident as John had seen it, the hearse losing control on the road, careening into the Camaro. But it was the Camaro which veered off toward the wooded area. Kurt violently whipped the steering wheel to the left, and the car's momentum caused it to flip and roll, coming to rest on its roof. A massive tree branch pinned the car down. She watched as the driver's side door was crushed in by the branch, and hearing Kurt cry out in pain at the impact, she watched as her head whipped and slammed off her passenger side window. Suddenly, everything went black. Finally, she understood. The tears had run out. Her body had stopped heaving. Now she was cold. She hugged her arms tight around her. With one hand, Sarah wiped away the last of the tears. "Thank you, John," she said finally. John watched as she sat under the tree looking down at the gravestone. She was balled into herself, trying to keep warm against the oncoming cold. He sat down next to her. He knew she could not see him or hear him, but John placed an arm around her. Suddenly, she smiled. She relaxed. "Hi, John," said Sarah. She didn't turn to look, just kept staring straight ahead at the gravestone. "I knew you'd come." The two sat there like that together. She was warmed by his touch. Neither of them spoke. The sun began to set. The twilight colors displayed a beautiful aura in the sky behind the gravestone. "I've got to go now, John," she said. "But I will be back soon, I promise." Sarah stood to leave. John watched as she closed her eyes and said a small prayer. Then quietly, she walked off down the hill, past the gravestone, toward the sunset. The cemetery was silent and peaceful, just the way John liked it.
It will work whether it likes or not. There we go. The button didn't want to click. So thank you. We're going to have a commercial break, and then we're going to come back.
And we'll chat.
Greetings and shabibans. We are the Retro Reductibus Cephala Podcast, a long-form bi-weekly show that celebrates all the things that made growing up awesome.
Yeah, that sounds good, but I don't know what all those words mean.
I think what Parasite Steve's trying to say is that on Retro Reductibus, we explore a range of retro goodness, from toys, video games, and movies, to cartoons, and even snacks and school lunches.
Oh.
And we do it all with a positive spin, a slew of killer guests, and some very adult language.
And you know what else is cool?
No.
This crazy show is part of the Door King Podcast Network with new episodes every Tentacle Tuesday.
What's that?
And if waiting 2 weeks for a new episode gives you a sad, know that we drop bonus episodes all the time, like the off-format Crow's Nest and an interview series we call The Brig.
You can listen to Retro Reductibus on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any app that's cool enough to carry the only show that celebrates all the things that make growing up awesome.
Hello, 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 my lovelies, and welcome back. And you probably noticed both of our books in that first commercial. So,
Yay. It's still for sale. You can still buy it.
Yeah, you can
It's
buy
out
it.
there.
This is hey, the whole episode is a commercial for the book. Please go check it out.
Hint, hint.
Say what?
Hint, hint.
My mother-in-law and I got to arc this because if Patty sends me horror stories, automatically I gotta share them with her. And then that started a whole nother conversation. And she showed me where they would race here in Newton when she was a teenager. And I'm like, I didn't know you raced. So what sparked the idea to have a race story with a hearse?
To be honest, I didn't even know it was a thing either when I wrote the story. I just thought that it would be cool if someone made a drag car out of a hearse. At the time the story was written, I was trying to submit it for an anthology of stories of local authors here in Ohio. It was basically, I think, a contest, and then the ones who received the most votes got put into the book. Or I could be mistaking that one for my flash fiction of Going Home. But I remember that the story did fairly well in terms of advancing until I finally received the email from the publisher saying that it wasn't selected for the final draft of the anthology, which I was disappointed about. But okay, I did actually end up buying the anthology when it came out because I wanted to read the other stories in it. But then I noticed the cover of the anthology that this story was supposed to be in seemed like a scene directly taken from my story. It was of an open road and it was rainy. And I thought, wait a minute, that's not cool. Like you take the idea for the cover from my story and then you don't use my story. And I think they responded back something to the effect like, it's an Ohio road that it's for local authors. It could be anywhere. It doesn't necessarily have to be your story. And I was like, okay, but it seems awfully suspicious. I mean, you're right, sure, but it just seems awfully suspicious that I write a story like that and then that ends up being the cover. But okay, whatever. Maybe I inspired it. Who knows? And they're just not giving me credit for it. But it doesn't really matter. I didn't make the anthology. So the story was never published until I finally put it into Inside My Nightmares. And that was literally the world had ever seen of it. And I think I did do a couple more read throughs and edits of it until it is what it is now in the book. In fact, I think that the PDF file that I read from was one of my earlier drafts. I don't even think it's what is in the book now. After I started reading through it, I realized, I think there's some small differences between what's in this and what's in the book. So I think what I read tonight was actually one of the drafts of it.
Both Going Home and that have found a home. This one in your collection that has been published with us, and Going Home did end up not only in the newsletter but a book itself,
which I'm very happy about. I can't tell you about Going Home. It was a flash fiction contest, and it was supposed to be 1,000 words or less. And what it was, there were 3 randomly generated images, and you had to utilize all 3 images in the telling of your flash fiction. Then each story would be posted on a website with the images that were generated. And that way, when you read through the story, you can see how each of the images are used. That story also did really well. Also, that's redundant, Ron. That one was an upvote kind of thing, where
Yeah.
you basically solicit your friends and get people to come to a website and vote for your story in order to make the final round. And as it turned out, I guess I just don't have that many friends because I ended up taking second place and not first. But considering the fact that it did as well as it did, that I did manage to take second place, I was pretty proud of that fact because it meant that the story was getting a lot of coverage.
It was a great story. And both 2 of your flash fiction ended up in Face Speaks.
The other one I think was The Key, wasn't it? Was it
Yes.
The Key?
The Key. Yeah, ended up in the Face Speaks easing newsletter, and then also the book of everything so far.
The Key, that flash fiction was meant for something else. There's a publisher. She's also on Facebook. I believe that she still does publishing, although I haven't communicated with her in a while. Her name is MJ Sidney. You can look her up if you want. MJ Sidney, she was putting out her own anthology of flash fiction stories, and she was put out the call for submissions. And so I believe I wrote The Key as a submission for that, for her collection of flash fiction stories. And when I gave it to you for the newsletter, I didn't completely rewrite it, but I did change a lot. I made a new draft of it because I thought that it was incoherent in some parts, and I wanted to kind of flesh it out a little bit. So I think the version that you got is marginally different than the version that MJ Sidney got.
I like our version a lot. Do you have a story that you wish would have gotten farther than it has so far? More views and more eyes?
Well, it's funny that you should ask that, because majority of the stories I've never actually put out into the world until I started working with Faycore Publishing. Up until then, they've only just existed on my hard drive, and I've never submitted them anywhere to be published or to have people read them. Mostly, most of the time, the only person who ever really gets to hear any of my stories is my mom, because every time I write one, I'll call her up and read it to her over the phone and see what she thinks about it, and then take her suggestions, change the story, or make the edits or whatever, and then that's basically just how it lives. At one point in time, I did have a website where I had put up some of the stories that I had read or that I had written. This one included the 13th race. This one included. I had put it up on that website along with a couple of other short stories as well. But that was 2001. No. Let me think. And when did I start that site? I think I started the site back in 2001, but I didn't actually start putting up the stories on it until maybe 2004 or 2005. I completely revamped the site and did everything new. As far as I know, the site's probably still out there, but God knows. I mean, it's so damn old now. I mean,
I
I
have
would
no
look.
idea what the
I
site
would
is
have to look.
called.
What is it called?
'Cause we
I
can't
have to look it
share
up.
When you find it, tell me and we'll share it.
Let's not.
Okay, fine then. When you find it, I'll read it.
I mean, yeah. If I can find it, I'll send you the link. But it doesn't need to be posted publicly. Not without a
Okay.
lot of work. It's not a professional looking site by any stretch of the imagination. It's pretty bad. But
So-
that was 2004. You know, I mean, what do you expect for web pages in 2004 from somebody that is using Dreamweaver to make web pages? Doesn't know anything
Understandable.
about making web pages.
It's all a learning curve, I found.
Oh, yeah.
Everything. This is a learning curve. And I'm trying to pick it up as I go.
Well, absolutely.
What out of the whole entire anthology, which one's your favorite? Well, not anthology, but story collection.
From Nightmares or just stories that I've written in general?
Nightmares.
Ooh, that's a tough one. Damn.
Because I have two favorites.
Well, I know you like Urban Legend and you like A Christmas Wish.
My most favorite was the 13th Race, Urban Legend, and then the Christmas Wish. Because, yeah, I know that feeling he had.
I suppose you could say it's like your kids, you love each one of them for different reasons, and you can't really play favorites one over the other.
Well, true, I can.
And when I'm in the moment of writing, when I'm truly in that moment and the rest of the world is closed off around me, and I'm there and I'm in the story and I'm writing and the words are flowing and the images are filling my mind as playing out like a movie. That one's my favorite. It's whatever I'm currently writing at the time, like the novel Last Entry of Grant Gilson that we'll try to finish up sometime this year. I've just been kind of a slacker about it. I've gotten to a comfortable part of the story where I've sort of taken a break, and it's very hard to get motivated to go back into it because I know that the rest of the story is just going to get more difficult to write. So I've sort of been putting it off and putting it off and putting it off, and which is bad because I was hoping to have it out this month. So it would be exactly a year after the release of this one. But now that year has come and gone. So it is my goal to try to get to finish it this year and have it released.
That's why I wanted to get you on here to have a sort of a late anniversary episode with one of the stories.
Well, that makes sense. And I really like the Last Entry of Grant Gilson because it's basically nonstop from start to finish, and it just doesn't really let up. There's not a lot of downtime in the story. And I'm hoping that I can maintain that momentum until I draw the story to its conclusion. And that being said, today, February 21st, 2025, at whatever time it is, 10:20 p.m., I do have a conclusion in mind for that story. Now, how I actually get there remains to be seen, but I do know how I want to end the story.
Oh, yeah. And that's good. It's like I already know how Friday's stories ends, but I'm trying to get to that point.
I think that the Last Entry of Grant Gilson will be completely different than anything I've written before.
Alrighty. Yes. From what I've seen, I haven't seen anything like it in what I've heard or read. And you've sent me a few things that weren't in the collection as well. Well, a couple of things. So. And your
I don't
anniversary
remember
was
what
the
all I've sent
15th.
you and what I haven't. So
That's okay. The last thing was about this couple at a hotel, and the relationship turned out to be not quite what was expected.
you sure that was mine? I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, yeah. They met on a beach because no, it was on a train. It was something I can't remember. It'll take me a little bit to remember, but it's the last weekend on the 15th was your official anniversary for the book. So
Yes.
belated happy birthday, not birthday, but
Hooray.
anniversary.
It's 1 year old. My book is 1 year old.
And this is a good way to celebrate it, telling people about it and reading a story from it.
I like it. You know, it's funny because as we discussed before the show, I've been a bit out of sorts because of my work this week and just being overly exhausted with the weather and the snow and the wind and the temperatures and everything, having to go back and forth to work. It's been trials and tribulations one way or another. So I can to admit I almost completely forgot about this episode tonight, and I was seriously thinking that it was unprinted pages. So I was all set to read a different story until you said that it has to be horror related. So which is why we ended up reading the 13th Race, that and the fact that you already had the Hearst clip art. So it makes sense. The story that I was thinking about reading is not horror related, but something that was inspired. I wrote the story back around 2005 when I was living in St. Pete. I was working part-time at Kmart doing overnight freight and going to school full-time at the St. Pete College for an associate's degree in computer networking. So when I would get home, there would be nothing on TV except Twilight Zone reruns. Ooh. I watched a lot of Twilight Zone back then. There's been, several different seasons and evolutions of Twilight Zone. So I can't claim that I've seen every episode, but I would say I've seen a pretty good majority of the old episodes with Rod Serling. To a point where I started having dreams that were very Twilight Zone-esque. And because I worked late hours from 10 p.m. to the 6 a.m. sometimes, and overnights when I would stay up on nights that I didn't have to work, and Twilight Zone came on at like 3 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So I watched a lot, and my dreams were very weird. And it's what inspired me to write the story that I was actually going to read tonight until you stated otherwise. So it's good because it prompted me to go back through and start reading that story again and start editing it so I can get it ready for the next collection of short stories that I'm going to put out after I finish the novel.
That works.
So I will inevitably end up finish editing this one and then go back and do a proper like read through and make another draft of it. Just, like you do when you're writing. So what I have right now is a rough draft. It's not the finished version of it. There's probably going to be some more changes to it, but it's a unique story in and of itself. One, because it's not horror related, and two, because it's largely romance, I guess.
Yes.
Which it's not something that I normally write, but because it's based on the Twilight Zone, it's very weird.
Okay, definitely curious.
Well, I hope so, because I want to generate some hype for it. And I may end up reading it online on our Allied Society after I've done some more work on it or something like that.
Well, yes, and I need to go through and make the little commercials of your stories. And whenever you do put that one out, of that one, it's just been overwhelming lately. But I'll get there. Okay.
We got time.
Oh, yes, we definitely have time. So, I think 2 more questions and then we should probably call it a night. What is your favorite part about a new story when you start writing?
The motivation and the energy that drives me to start writing it. When I get a really good idea, it seems like I can't wait to get to my computer so I can start putting these words, these thoughts down on the computer and just finally get it out of me. It's kind of like this esoteric cleansing a little bit where my mind is so full of these ideas that I don't really have room to think about anything else until I can clear my brain of all of that and put it on the virtual page. And then I can start thinking about other things and focusing on where do I want the story to go? How do I need to change it? Does it make sense? Is it logical? Is there anything I need to change about it? Things of that nature. Then invariably, and I would say this happens with a good majority of my stories, once I hit a certain point and I get all of those thoughts down, then I will start to lose that energy and motivation and the story will drop off. And then I'll leave it hanging and I'll stop writing. I'll go live life, do other things, get involved in other projects, and the story never sees the light of day. Then at some point, I'll look at it again and go, oh, yeah, I remember that. And now my brain is filled with new ideas where I feel like I need to finish the story. And that's usually how it happens. The 13th race, I would say, is an exception to that rule because it is one that I wrote in one sitting. It took me several hours and then a lot of editing and polishing from that point. But it wasn't the kind of thing where it dropped off halfway through and then I ended up picking it up a couple of days later. It was 13th race was written in one sitting, overnight, basically. And it's rare that happens where I will just sit down and write a story in one sitting. Even with the epic poem that was in the poetry collection, Honesty in Verse, even it wasn't written in one sitting. And in fact, the first installment, The Tale of Wulfric the Wanderer and the Lady Sandal, it was written over the course of a week and then had random edits over years until it became what it is. The second installment, The Continuing Tale of Wulfric the Wanderer, was inspired by a breakup with a girl that I was dating at the time. And I realized by this breakup that Wulfric's story was not quite done yet, that there was more to it. Run! What's up, Stefan? And then the third one, the finale, the epilogue, actually came even later. After, I think it was even after my marriage, after my divorce. So, I mean, there's literally like a decade between the writing of the first poem and the third poem. And I realized that things had to happen in order for it to come to a logical conclusion to where it ends up in the epilogue. The Legend of Wulfric the Wanderer introduces Wulfric, our hero of the story, our epic hero, who is somewhat based upon kind of a little bit based upon Beowulf, and also the character Aeolus from the Legendary Journeys of Hercules, starring Kevin Sorbo. Kind of an Aeolus type character. So if you remember Aeolus from Hercules, the Legendary Journeys,
Yes.
little bit of both. And I introduced another character named Rado. Rado is a druid, but he didn't start out a druid. He started out an evil wizard, much like Jared from the original story. Sorcerer, and he was involved in this Black Coven and all of that. And then he committed treason and ran away from the Black Coven, and it basically led to the spirit of nature, which is never specifically named in the poem, but which we could refer to as Gaia, giving Rado back his powers for the purpose of good, to be a servant of Gaia. Although it's never specifically stated in the poem, that is sort of how I envision him, where he was stripped of his powers by the Coven back to being normal, but he still had the essence of magic within him and was picked by the spirit of earth and given the powers of a druid. So he's immortal. He's now immortal and incredibly powerful with spirit of nature's magics. So Rado will never die. Wulfric, we already know his conclusion, but Rado will never die. So when I got into playing EverQuest and like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that, Rado became my ultimate go-to character for online gaming. And now he basically exists in EverQuest on Norrath, but the poem came long before EverQuest ever did. EverQuest was released in 1999, and the poem was written in 1993. So, yeah. So back to the point, more often than not, I never really sit down and write a story in one sitting. That it's usually a process. It takes time, and I will eventually come back to it and finish it. So the last entry of Grant Gilson is turning out to be the same way. It's been sitting on my hard drive now for God knows how long, because honestly, I can't even remember when I started writing the story. I mean, I was living here in this apartment, so it wasn't that long ago, but there's been a considerable amount of time that's passed since I originally started the story versus what it is now, and most likely what it will be by the time I try to get it published this year.
Close to a year, give or take 2 months. Okay. Where would you like people to find you?
I don't think that should count as a second question, because we usually end all of our podcasts with that.
Yes, but and if you look in the comments, my dear viewers, you'll find a link to everything Fake Horror has published of his stuff. Are you published anywhere else?
Fake Horror is it.
Okay.
I mean, unless you want to go back through the old issues of the Appalachian newspaper and the Mountain Times in Boone, North Carolina, and see if you can find any of my old articles, but good luck with that. Because that was back in the early 90s. That was probably 91, 92. And good luck with that.
If I really wanted to, I could find everyone, but I have no wish at this moment. But every story he has published, story and poem, you can find in the books to read link in the comments. And okay, there's your second question. Now, where do you wish to be found?
As I have stated before, I'm still in a moratorium on Facebook. I'm not engaging in Facebook at the moment. While I still have it on my phone, and every now and then I will open it up to see something that that someone has posted. I'm not actively posting myself, and probably won't be for a while, and that's by personal choice. So
Okay.
I have been spending a great deal of time on TikTok. I haven't really made a lot of new content, but I did some videos while I was on vacation in Daytona Beach, which I will most likely work on this weekend and try to make a couple new videos for TikTok as well. But this is the first weekend I've had in a while where I haven't had anything scheduled to do anything. So I do plan on trying to get some writing done now that I've already opened up this old new story, or this new old story. I will at least try to finish the edits on it, just in case I need to pull one to read in the future. And I do want to try to work on the last entry of Grant Gilson this weekend as well, because I really do believe in that story, and I want to get it done.
I
I
want to
have
see
sent
it.
I have sent it, the portion that I do have. It's unfinished, but I have sent the portion that I do have to a beta reader who will remain nameless, and she had a lot of good comments on it. Nothing in the way of things that I could change in terms of making the story better, but she did say that she was intrigued by it and that she really liked the way that it was written. So I'll take that as a moralistic win, and hope that other people feel the same way about it when they finally do read it. It probably will be too long to read in one episode of like Corpse Garden Chronicles or Ally Society, because it will most likely be around 60,000 words by the time I'm done with it.
If we want to do a chapter or two at a time for book reading, we can do that. But
Yeah, it's possible.
that is entirely acceptable. But for right now, if you would like to message him otherwise, I can, as usual, Friday can get the message to him or tell you how to find his stuff. And I am here at Elliott. I'm here at Fakehor. I'm at Corpse Garden Chronicles, Friday with Library in the Blue Box, and of course my author page, Jennifer Elliott. And I hope, my dear listeners, you come back to see the next story, and or if my other favorite co-host finally has time, we will get back on the death thing that we had planned.
Well, I do have the author page on Facebook, Ronald W Gillespie Jr. -author. And now, since our lovely Friday is now the administrator of that page, then it's still worthwhile to go check out the author page and see all the kind of cool updates that Friday is making on that page in my absence from Facebook. So that is one way you can find me. And if you were to direct message me from that page, I would see it because I am still on Messenger.
Yes. So please talk to him. Get a signed copy. Something. It will be awesome. We need signed copies. I need to work on mine. I keep getting distracted. But yeah, either way, Good night, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Happy trails to you until we meet